Hello, you tired little peeps. It's that time once again. So let's snuggle up fast, because tonight we're traveling back in time to walk the sandy floors of the ludus and observe the disciplined, often quiet routine of those who live to fight in the arena. So if you are new to the channel or returning, liking the video significantly helps. Also, please let me know where you're listening in from and what time it is for you. Now get comfortable and let's begin. The stone walls of the cell are cool to the touch, a stark contrast to the warmth of the morning sun that has not yet breached the horizon. In the ludus, the gladiatorial school, the day begins before the city of Rome fully stirs. There is a heaviness to the air here, a scent of old straw, oiled leather, and the unwashed dust of the training ground that settles over everything. It is a place of routine, of absolute structure, where every hour is accounted for and every movement is scrutinized. To understand what it was like to be a gladiator, one must first understand the silence of the early morning. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of preparation. For the recruit, the novitius, the transition into this life is jarring, not because of the violence, but because of the confinement. The world outside, with its bustling markets and chaotic streets, feels miles away, though it is only just beyond the high walls. Inside, the world shrinks down to a courtyard, a mess hall, and a small sleeping cell. The cell itself is barely large enough for a sleeping pallet. It is a functional space, devoid of decoration, intended only for rest between the endless cycles of training. The stone is worn smooth by the generations of men who have slept here before, men who have long since vanished into history. When a man enters the ludus, whether he was sold into slavery or volunteered to pay off debts, he undergoes a fundamental transformation. If he is a volunteer, he signs the octoramentum. This is not merely a contract, it is an oath that binds him body and soul to the lanista, the owner of the school. By speaking the words of the oath, he agrees to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. It is a heavy promise, spoken in a low voice, marking the end of his previous life as a citizen with rights and the beginning of his life as property, as a tool of entertainment. But in these early hours, the philosophical weight of that oath is less pressing than the physical reality of the cold floor and the scratchy wool of the blanket. Breakfast is the first order of the day. It is not a feast. The diet of a gladiator is specific, designed for bulk and endurance rather than culinary pleasure. They are often called hordearii, or barley men, for a reason. The morning meal usually consists of a barley porridge, perhaps mixed with beans or ash. It is thick, bland, and heavy in the stomach. The taste is earthy, simple sustenance meant to provide the energy required for hours of physical exertion. There is no wine at this hour, only water, sometimes stale, drawn from the cisterns. The men eat together in the mess hall, sitting on wooden benches that have been polished by the friction of rough tunics over countless years. The atmosphere in the mess hall is subdued. There is little energy for idle chatter. Some men stare into their bowls, lost in thought. Others eat mechanically, the rhythmic movement of spoons the only real activity. The hierarchy of the school is already visible here. The veterans, the established fighters who have survived multiple bouts in the arena, sit with a certain ease. They have earned their place. The newcomers, the novices, sit nervously, watching, learning, trying to understand the unwritten rules of this closed society. They eat quickly, eyes downcast, aware that they are at the bottom of a very steep and dangerous ladder. After the meal, the training begins. The sun is just starting to warm the sand of the central courtyard. This sand is raked smooth every evening, a blank canvas for the day's work. The doctor, the head trainer, usually a retired gladiator himself, stands watching. He carries a wooden staff, a symbol of his authority, and a tool for correction. He does not need to shout. His presence alone is enough to bring the men to attention. The training does not start with swords. It starts with the body. Calisthenics form the foundation of the morning. The men run in circles around the perimeter of the courtyard. Their sandals kick up small clouds of dust that hang in the still air. They perform squats and lunges until their muscles burn. It is a dull, repetitive ache. The focus is on building a stamina that goes beyond normal human limits. A fight in the arena might last 10 minutes or 20, and to fight with heavy armor and weapons for that long requires a reservoir of strength that takes months, if not years, to build. The repetition is hypnotic, one foot in front of the other, the breath entering and leaving the lungs in a steady rhythm. For the observer, it might look like mere exercise, but for the gladiator, it is the forging of armor beneath the skin. They are building layers of fat and muscle to protect vital organs and arteries from shallow cuts. This is why the barley diet is so essential. It creates a layer of flesh that can be sacrificed to the blade without ending the fight. The ideal gladiator body is not the chiseled marble statue of a god, but something thicker, more solid, like a tree trunk or a bear. As the sun climbs higher, the wooden practice swords, the rudis, are brought out. They are heavier than real metal swords. This is a deliberate design. If a man can wield a heavy wooden block with speed and precision, a steel gladius will feel like a feather in his hand. The novices are directed to the palace, a wooden post sunk deep into the ground. This post is the gladiator's first opponent. It never tires, it never retreats, and it never complains. The recruit stands before the post. He learns the basic positions. He learns to keep his shield up, covering his chest and throat. He learns to crouch slightly, lowering his center of gravity. The doctor calls out instructions: thrust, recover, shield bash, recover. The wood of the practice sword meets the wood of the post. It is a dull thud, not a sharp clash. Over and over again, the motion must become muscle memory. There is no room for thought in the arena. The body must react before the mind has time to process the danger. So, they drill. They strike the post 1,000 times in a morning. The shoulder aches, the grip weakens, but they continue. The texture of the wooden sword becomes familiar to the hand. The rough grain, the weight of the pommel, the balance point. Blisters form, break, and callus over. This is the process of hardening. The hands of a gladiator are his livelihood. They must be strong enough to crush, yet sensitive enough to feel the slight shift in an opponent's weight. The novices watch the veterans out of the corner of their eyes. The veterans move with an economy of motion. They do not waste energy. Every step they take is calculated. When they strike the post, it is with a focused power, a snap of the hips that drives the force through the arm and into the wood. The novices mimic this, awkwardly at first, stumbling, overextending, leaving themselves open to imaginary counterattacks. The doctor walks among them, correcting a stance here, adjusting a grip there. He is patient, but exacting. He knows that a bad habit formed now will be fatal later. He taps a leg that is too straight with his staff, a reminder to keep the knees bent. He pushes down on a shield that has drifted too low. The instruction is physical, tactile. Words are often lost in the exertion, but a tap on the shoulder or a shift of the elbow is understood instantly. The heat of the day begins to build. The high walls of the ludus trap the warmth, creating a stifling environment. Sweat runs down faces and backs, soaking into the wool tunics. The smell of the place intensifies. Sweat, dust, and the vinegar-like scent of the cheap wine used to clean wounds. Yet, the rhythm remains constant. There is a meditative quality to it. In the repetition, the mind can detach. The recruit stops thinking about the life he lost, the family he might never see again, or the debts that brought him here. He thinks only of the post, the target, the angle of the strike. The world narrows down to the immediate task. Water breaks are brief. The men gather around the trough, scooping water with ladles or their hands. They do not speak much. They breathe. They wipe the sweat from their eyes. They check their palms for new blisters. This shared suffering creates a bond, even though they know they might one day have to kill the man standing next to them. For now, they are brothers in toil. They are united by the discipline of the school. They are a distinct class of people, separated from the rest of society by the walls of the ludus and the oath they have sworn. In the background, the sounds of the city persist, a low hum of distant activity, carts rolling on cobblestones, faint shouts of merchants, the barking of dogs. But inside, the focus is absolute. The doctor signals the end of the post-training. The wooden swords are lowered. Shoulders slump momentarily in relief. But the day is far from over. This was merely the warm-up, the conditioning of the arm. Next comes the conditioning of the mind and the feet. Footwork drills. They move across the sand in lines. Step forward, drag the back foot. Step back, drag the front foot. Lateral movement. Circle left, circle right. The sand shifts unpredictably under their sandals. They must learn to find stability on unstable ground. The arena floor will not be a flat, paved street. It will be churned up, potentially slick with blood or mud. Balance is everything. If a gladiator falls, he is at the mercy of his opponent. So they learn to grip the earth with their toes, to keep their weight centered. They learn to pivot without crossing their feet, a fatal mistake that leaves a man off balance. The doctor watches the feet. He ignores the hands for now. He knows that a fight is won or lost by position. A man who controls the distance controls the fight. The recruits stumble. They trip over their own feet. They get tired and their form degrades. The doctor stops them. He makes them start again. Slow down. Precision before speed. The movement must be fluid, like water flowing over rocks. It must be silent. A heavy stepper is a slow mover. They try again. Step, drag, step, drag. The sound of sandals shuffling on sand is a constant whisper in the courtyard. As the morning turns to midday, the shadows shorten. The sun beats down directly into the courtyard. The training shifts gears. It is time for paired practice. The novices are paired up with each other. They are given padded armor for their arms and legs, and helmets with grills that obscure their faces. The anonymity of the helmet is the first taste of their future identity. When the helmet is on, the man disappears. He becomes a myrmeo, a thraex, a secutor. He becomes a type, a symbol. He is no longer Marcus or Lucius. He is a fighter. The pairs face each other. They hold the heavy wooden swords. They are tired from the morning's exertion, but now they must focus on a thinking opponent. This is not the static post. This opponent moves. He blocks. He strikes back. The doctor calls for slow sparring. He does not want injuries, not yet. He wants technical correctness. He wants to see the lessons of the post applied to a living target. The wooden swords meet. There is a resistance now. The shock of impact travels up the arm. The recruits learn to absorb the force, to deflect rather than stop it cold. They circle each other, wary, looking for openings, a dropped shield, an exposed leg, a moment of hesitation. They are learning to read body language, a tensing of the shoulder that telegraphs a strike, a shift in the eyes, the slight intake of breath before an attack. These are the subtle cues that will mean the difference between life and death. The doctor moves between the pairs, offering quiet critiques. "Too wide," he says to one. "Keep your elbows in." To another, "You are leaning forward. Stay back." The instruction is continuous, a steady stream of correction. The goal is to strip away the instinct to brawl, the wild swinging of a desperate man, and replace it with the cool, calculated technique of a professional. A gladiator is not a savage. He is a skilled artisan of combat. His trade is fighting, and like a carpenter or a mason, he must know his tools and his materials intimately. The sparring continues until the midday meal. The pace is grueling, but necessary. The body must be broken down so it can be rebuilt. The mind must be emptied of fear and filled with technique. As the sun reaches its zenith, the doctor finally calls a halt. The men lower their weapons. They remove their helmets, faces flushed and dripping. They are exhausted, their muscles trembling. But they have survived the morning. They wash their hands and faces in the trough, the cool water a brief respite. They head back to the mess hall, walking slowly, conserving every ounce of energy. The morning session is done. The afternoon awaits. The midday meal, the prandium, marks the pivot of the day. It is a lighter affair than the morning porridge, often consisting of cold leftovers, perhaps some cheese, figs, or bread dipped in wine. The heat of the afternoon is approaching, a blanket of warmth that settles over the city and the ludus alike. In Rome, this is the time for the meridiaccio, the midday rest. For the gladiators, this rest is not a luxury. It is a physiological necessity mandated by the lanista. A tired fighter is a clumsy fighter, and a clumsy fighter is a damaged investment. The men retire to the shade of the porticos or return to their small cells. The stone walls, having absorbed the morning's chill, now offer a sanctuary from the blazing sun. The ludus falls into a hush. It is a heavy, drowsy silence. The dust in the courtyard settles completely. A few flies might buzz lazily through the air, but the frantic energy of the morning drills has evaporated. Men lie on their pallets or sit with their backs against the walls, eyes closed, breathing deeply. They are conserving their strength, letting their heart rate slow, allowing the muscles to loosen after hours of tension. This quiet period is also the domain of the medicus, the school's doctor. The health of a gladiator is of paramount importance. These men are expensive assets, fed, housed, and trained at great cost. To lose one to a simple infection or a carelessly treated strain is a financial failure. The medicus moves through the quarters with his assistants. He smells of herbs, sage, thyme, and vinegar. He carries a box of instruments and jars of salves. He checks the novices first. He looks at their hands, inspecting the blisters caused by the wooden swords. If a blister is infected, it is lanced and cleaned with wine. If it is merely raw, it is covered with a salve made of pitch and wax to speed the hardening of the skin. He checks their feet for bruises or cracks. He presses his fingers into sore shoulders, checking for tears in the muscle. His touch is professional, firm, and impersonal. He is a mechanic inspecting a machine. For the veterans, the care is even more specialized. Many of them bear old scars, the roadmap of their careers etched into their skin. The medicus checks these old wounds to ensure they remain sealed and healthy. He might prescribe a massage. The unctors, the masseurs, are an integral part of the ludus staff. They arrive with amphorae of olive oil. The oil is thick and golden, warming in the ambient heat. The massage is a ritual in itself. The gladiator lies on a wooden bench. The unctor pours the oil onto his hands and begins to work it into the fighter's back, legs, and arms. The motion is rhythmic and deep. The goal is to flush out the lactic acid, to keep the muscles pliable. The smell of the oil permeates the air, a rich, organic scent that mixes with the stone and dust. The unctor's hands find the knots of tension, working them out with slow, deliberate pressure. It is a strange intimacy, this care bestowed upon men whose ultimate purpose is violence. For an hour, they are pampered like aristocrats, their bodies treated with reverence. After the oil comes the strigil. This curved metal tool is used to scrape the oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin. The unctor draws the strigil across the gladiator's back in long, smooth strokes. The metal dulls the skin, collecting the gray sludge of the morning's exertion, which is then flicked away. It is a cleansing process, exfoliating and purifying. The skin is left red and glowing, stimulated and clean. This hygiene is strictly enforced. A clean gladiator is less likely to succumb to fever. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, shifting the shadows across the courtyard, the rest period ends. The transition is gradual. Men stir, stretching, testing their limbs. The lethargy of the nap is shaken off. The water troughs are visited again. Faces are splashed. The focus returns. The afternoon session is dedicated to specialization. The general conditioning is done. Now they must become the specific types of fighters they are destined to be. The armaturae, the different classes of gladiators, separate into groups. The doctor assigns them based on their physique and aptitude. A large, heavily built man with broad shoulders and thick legs is not suited for speed. He is built for power. He will become a murmillo. A smaller, quicker man with long reach might be trained as a retiarius, a net fighter. The equipment is brought out from the armory. This is the first time in the day that real metal appears, though the weapons are still often blunted for safety. The murmillo puts on his helmet. It is a heavy bronze piece, the cassis Christa, with a broad brim and a stylized crest that resembles a fish fin. The face mask is grilled, offering excellent protection but severely limiting visibility. Putting it on is like entering a cave. The world is reduced to what can be seen through the small eye holes. The peripheral vision is gone. The sounds of the ludus become muffled, echoing slightly inside the bronze shell. The breath sounds loud in his own ears. He must learn to fight without seeing the ground beneath his feet, relying on the proprioception developed during the morning's footwork drills. He straps on the ochrea, a metal greave, onto his left leg. It is padded with wool to prevent chafing. It is heavy. He picks up the scutum, the tall rectangular shield. It covers him from chin to shin. It is a wall. He draws the gladius, the short stabbing sword. His stance changes. He hunches behind the shield, presenting only the bronze boss and the top of his helmet to the opponent. He is a tank, a fortification. His training focuses on economy. He does not run. He advances. He does not swing wildly. He waits for the opponent to strike the shield, then thrusts from behind it. It is a style of patience and crushing weight. Across the courtyard, the retiarius prepares. He is the antithesis of the murmillo. He wears no helmet. His face is exposed to the air and the eyes of the crowd. He wears no greaves. His only armor is the monica, a segmented metal or leather guard on his left arm, and the gallerus, a metal plate extending from the shoulder to protect the neck. He feels light, almost naked compared to the heavy infantry types. In his hands, He holds the net, the reet. It is weighted at the edges with lead. It is tricky to handle. If he is not careful, he can tangle himself. He practices casting it. He gathers the mesh in his hand, judges the distance, and throws. The net flares out, a spinning web meant to entangle and trap. He must learn to retrieve it quickly if he misses. He also holds the trident, the fascina. It is a long, three-pronged spear. His game is distance. He must keep the murmillo away. He dances, he retreats, he circles. His training is about evasion and opportunism. He learns to poke, to harass, to goad the heavier man into a mistake. Then there is the Thraex, the Thracian. He is equipped with a small square shield, the parmula, and 2 high greaves. His weapon is the sika, a curved short sword. The curve is designed to reach around a shield, to hook into the unarmored back or leg of an opponent. His style is aggressive. He cannot hide behind his small shield like the murmillo. He must be active, parrying and striking in a flurry of motion. The curve of the blade changes the geometry of the fight. A straight block might not stop a curved strike. The Thraex learns to angle his attacks, to visualize the tip of his blade hooking around obstacles. The Doctore orchestrates these matchups. He pits the murmillo against the Thraex, a classic pairing. The heavy shield against the curved sword. The clash of styles is the essence of the arena. They spar with blunted weapons. The sound of the courtyard changes. It is no longer the dull thud of wood on wood. It is the ringing of metal on metal. The clang of a sword hitting a shield boss, the scrape of a blade sliding down a greave. The instructors watch closely for fatigue. A tired man drops his shield. A tired man stumbles. In the afternoon heat, inside the bronze helmets, the temperature can rise dangerously high. The murmillos, encased in their armor, sweat profusely. The sweat runs into their eyes, stinging and blinding, but they cannot wipe it away. They must blink it out. They must regulate their breathing to avoid hyperventilating in the stale air of the helmet. The doctor calls halts frequently to let them drink and breathe. They learn the rules of the arena, which are as important as the fighting techniques. They learn how to surrender. If a gladiator is defeated, if he is disarmed or pinned, he must know how to signal. He lifts a finger, usually the index finger of the left hand. This gesture is universal. It acknowledges defeat and appeals to the editor, the organizer of the games, and the crowd for a decision. They practice this dignity. Even in defeat, a gladiator must maintain his composure. He must not beg. He must not cry out. He kneels, exposes his neck, and waits. To practice this calmness in the face of simulated death is a psychological hardening as intense as the physical training. They also learn showmanship. The crowd in the Colosseum or the local amphitheater does not just want blood. They want a narrative. They want to see skill and bravery. The gladiators are taught to exaggerate certain movements, to make them visible to the people sitting in the highest rows. A wide swing, a dramatic pause, a clash of shields that rings out like a bell. They are actors as much as soldiers. The doctor corrects a dull engagement. Make them see it, he instructs. Make them feel the danger. The afternoon wears on. The shadows lengthen across the sand, turning from sharp black to a softer gray. The intensity of the sparring winds down. The heavy armor is unstrapped. The relief of taking off a bronze helmet after hours of wear is immense. The cool air hits the sweaty face. The neck is freed from the weight. There are red marks on their foreheads and chins where the padding pressed against the skin. They rub their sore limbs. But the day is not finished. As the physical training ends, the maintenance begins. The weapons and armor must be cleaned. The sand of the arena is abrasive. It gets into every joint and crevice. If left unchecked, it causes rust and wear. The men sit on benches outside the armory, rags and oil in hand. They dismantle the armor where possible. They wipe down the bronze until it gleams. They check the leather straps for fraying. A broken strap in the arena can mean death, so they inspect them with obsessive care. They sharpen the daggers and swords using whetstones. The rhythmic sound of stone on steel fills the evening air. It is a scraping, soothing sound. Shh, shh. It is a quiet time for reflection. The adrenaline of the sparring fades, replaced by the satisfaction of caring for the tools of their trade. They talk quietly among themselves now. The strict discipline of the drill relaxes slightly. They discuss the day's sparring. "You dropped your guard on the left," one might say to another. "Your net cast was short," another might comment. They share knowledge. They are a team, a family of sorts, bound by their shared fate. They know the strengths and weaknesses of every man in the school. They know who is fast, who is strong, who is afraid. The sun dips below the horizon. The sky turns a deep indigo. Lamps are lit in the ludus, casting flickering orange light against the stone walls. The smell of the evening meal begins to waft from the kitchen. It is usually more substantial than the morning meal. A stew of beans, lentils, perhaps some salted fish or meat if the lanista is feeling generous, and vegetables. The men put away their equipment. The armory is locked. The day's violence is shelved. They wash again, removing the afternoon sweat and the grime of the metal polishing. They move to the mess hall, their bodies heavy, but their appetites sharp. The cycle of the day is nearing its close, but the evening holds its own routines, its own quiet moments of existence within the walls that separate them from the rest of the world. The evening meal, known as the cena, is the social anchor of the gladiator's existence. Entering the mess hall after the sun has set, the atmosphere is markedly different from the somber, hasty breakfast of the morning. The room is lit by oil lamps suspended from the ceiling beams, casting long, dancing shadows against the plastered walls. The smell is heavy and savory, a thick stew of broad beans, lentils, and barley, seasoned with garum, the ubiquitous fermented fish sauce of Rome, and perhaps a touch of olive oil. The food is ladled out from great iron cauldrons. It is hot, steaming, and plentiful. This specific diet, often referred to as sagina, is carefully calibrated. To a modern eye, or even to the eye of a wealthy Roman aristocrat accustomed to exotic meats and delicate wines, this might look like peasant food, and in many ways, it is. But for the gladiator, it is fuel for survival. The high carbohydrate content of the barley and beans builds the subcutaneous fat that acts as armor. The doctors and the lanista know that a lean fighter is a fragile fighter. They want their men to have a layer of bulk that can absorb a shallow cut without damaging a muscle or severing a nerve. There is another, more peculiar element to their diet that is often mixed into these evening stews or drunk separately as a tonic, a concoction containing wood ash or bone ash. It has a chalky, bitter taste that never quite becomes familiar, no matter how many times it is consumed. But the men drink it without complaint. They call it their tonic. They understand, through the accumulated wisdom of the ludus, that this ash strengthens their bones. It provides the calcium and strontium necessary to heal microfractures sustained in training and to prevent bones from snapping under the impact of a heavy shield or a wooden sword. When a gladiator smiles, his teeth are often surprisingly strong, a testament to this mineral-rich, calcium-heavy regimen. As they eat, the silence of the day breaks. The mess hall hums with low voices. This is the only time the strict discipline relaxes enough to allow for semblance of community. They sit on the benches, shoulders touching, dipping coarse bread into the stew. They talk of the day's training, dissecting the sparring matches with the obsessive detail of professionals. They critique the doctor's mood, speculate on upcoming games, and share rumors from the city that have filtered in through the servants or the guards. This group is known as the Familia Gladiatoria. It is a family in the truest, most desperate sense. By law, they are infamous, stripped of their rights, social outcasts on the same level as actors and prostitutes. To the outside world, they are commodities, objects of fascination and revulsion. But inside these walls, they are brothers. They are a closed society with its own laws, its own language, and its own hierarchy. At the head of the table sit the primus palis, the first sword, the highest-ranking gladiator in the school. He gets the best cut of the meat, if there is any. He commands respect not through fear, but through survival. He has lived through the arena. He has killed, and he has been spared. The novices look at him with a mixture of awe and envy. He represents the possibility of survival, the distant hope of the rudies, the wooden sword given as a symbol of freedom. After the bowls are scraped clean, the men do not immediately disperse. The evening is their own. Some produce dice, small cubes made of bone or wood, worn smooth by constant handling. Gambling is technically illegal in Rome for much of the year, but in the barracks of the ludus, it is ignored. They play for small stakes, extra rations, a better sleeping mat, or coins they have managed to keep or earn as tips from admiring fans. The dice tumble across the wooden tables. The game is simple, usually a version of tally, played with knuckle bones. It relies on luck, and for men whose lives depend on the whim of the crowd and the gods, luck is a tangible force to be courted. Others use this time for quieter pursuits. A gladiator might sit in a corner, laboriously carving a piece of wood into a small figurine or repairing a loose strap on his sandal. Some, those who are literate, might read or write letters. These are often the volunteers, the octorati, men who fell into debt and sold themselves into the school. They still have ties to the world outside, wives, children, creditors. They write by the dim light of the lamps, the stylus scratching into a wax tablet, trying to maintain a connection to a life that feels increasingly like a dream. The psychological weight of the ludus is heavy in the evenings. During the day, the exhaustion of the body keeps the mind from wandering. But at night, the reality of their situation settles in. They are prisoners. The walls are high and the gates are locked. Sentries patrol the perimeter. These guards are not there to keep people out. They are there to keep the investment in. A gladiator is worth a small fortune. To let one escape is a financial disaster for the lanista. Despite the captivity, there is a strange sense of security within the walls. Outside, the streets of Rome at night are dangerous, dark, and lawless. Inside, there is food, there is shelter, and there is purpose. For the slaves who were brought here from the edges of the empire, from Thrace, from Gaul, from Numidia, the ludus is the only home they have in this strange land. The men around them are the only tribe they know. This bond is formalized in the collegia, the burial clubs. Gladiators are acutely aware of their mortality. Death is not an abstract concept. It is a colleague who doesn't come back from the games. They contribute a small portion of their earnings to a communal fund. If a man falls in the arena, this fund ensures he receives a proper burial. He will not be thrown into a common pit or left for the carrion birds. He will be cremated or buried with a marker, his name and his victories recorded. It is a final act of dignity, a promise that they will not be forgotten. The discussion of the burial fund is a common topic in the evenings, a practical matter handled with solemnity. As the night deepens, the lamps burn low. The oil runs out, and the wicks begin to sputter. The lanista or his stewards will eventually signal the end of the evening. It is time for sleep. The men rise from the benches. The games of dice are packed away. The conversations trail off. They move towards the sleeping quarters. The sleeping cells, the kelly, are arranged in rows around the courtyard. They are small, often no more than 3 meters square. Some are solitary, others are shared by 2 men. The door is a simple wooden lattice or a heavy curtain. Inside, the air is still and close. The furniture is minimal. A wooden pallet with a straw mattress, a wool blanket, perhaps a small shelf or a niche in the wall. In these niches, many gladiators keep their personal gods. Small clay statues of Hercules, the patron of strength and heroes, are common. Hercules knew suffering. He performed labors. He was a natural idol for men of the burden. Others keep images of Mars, the god of war. But the most pervasive deity in the ludus is Nemesis. She is the goddess of chance, of retribution, of the unpredictable turn of fate. She is the one who decides if a sword strikes true or glances off a shield. Before lying down, a gladiator might touch the small clay figure, whispering a prayer not for victory, but for fortune, for a good death, if death must come. The men strip off their tunics. They lie down on the straw mattresses. The straw rustles under their weight. It is scratchy, but they are too tired to care. The physical fatigue acts as a narcotic. The soreness in the muscles, the shoulders from the shield, the legs from the stance, becomes a dull background hum. The sounds of the ludus at night are different from the day. The shouting and the clashing of steel are replaced by the sounds of slumber. The heavy breathing of dozens of men, the occasional cough, the shifting of a body on a wooden frame. Through the small barred windows high in the cells, the sounds of the city drift in, muffled and distant. A dog barking, a wagon wheel rumbling on stone, the cry of a night watchman. For the new recruits, the novici, sleep might not come easily. They lie in the dark, staring at the ceiling. They replay the day's failures, the sting of the doctor's staff, the fear of the first time they will step onto the sand of the real arena. The anticipation is a torment. They wonder if they will freeze. They wonder if it will hurt. They wonder what it feels like to die. The veterans, however, usually sleep deeply. They have learned to compartmentalize. The arena is for the day. The night is for rest. They know that worrying steals strength. They have seen men drive themselves mad with anxiety, losing weight and focus until they are useless. A veteran treats sleep as another part of his training. He commands his body to rest. In the corridors, the night guards make their rounds. The soft scuff of their boots on the stone is a rhythmic reminder of the containment. They carry torches that cast fleeting beams of light through the latticed doors, briefly illuminating a sleeping face or a hanging sword belt. The guards and the gladiators have a complex relationship. They are captors and captives, yet they live in the same ecosystem. There is often a grudging respect, or at least a transactional peace, between them. The seasons also dictate the comfort of the night. In the winter, the stone cells are like ice boxes. The men huddle under their blankets, perhaps sharing body heat if they share a cell. The dampness seeps into the bones, making old fractures ache. In the summer, the cells are ovens, trapping the day's heat. The air becomes thick and suffocating, heavy with the smell of sweat and oil. But regardless of the temperature, the routine holds. Dreams in the ludus are vivid. The mind, released from the constant focus of drilling, wanders. Some dream of their old lives, the farm in Gaul, the shop in Antioch, the wife they haven't seen in years. These are the painful dreams, the ones that leave a man waking up with a hollow feeling in his chest. Others dream of the fight, the flash of a blade, the roar of the crowd. These are the anxiety dreams, the rehearsal of fears. And some, the lucky ones, dream of nothing at all. A black, velvet void of unconsciousness that lasts until the first gray light of dawn touches the sky. But tonight, the ludus is quiet. The moon is high, bathing the central courtyard in a pale silver light. The wooden post, the palace, stands in the center, a silent sentinel casting a long shadow across the raked sand. It waits. The wooden swords rack against the wall wait. The armor in the armory waits. The entire machine of the school is paused, suspended in the amber of the night. As the hours creep towards morning, the temperature drops. A breeze might stir the dust in the courtyard. The city of Rome never truly sleeps, but it quiets down. The ludus, however, is a world apart. It is a monastery of war. And in the deep hours of the night, the gladiators are just men. Stripped of their armor, their weapons, and their ferocious personas, they are vulnerable human beings needing rest. They sleep to rebuild the fibers of their muscles. They sleep to escape the walls. They sleep because tomorrow, the cycle begins again. The trumpet will sound, the barley will be boiled, and the sand will be waiting. But before the sun rises, there is a distinct period in the timeline of a gladiator's life that we must explore. The days leading up to the munus. The games. The routine we have observed is the baseline, the standard operating procedure. But when a show is announced, when the editor contracts the lanista for a spectacle, the atmosphere in the school shifts dramatically. The air becomes charged with a different kind of electricity. The arrival of the editor's agents at the ludus is a moment of high theater and cold calculation. The editor, usually a politician seeking votes or a wealthy citizen fulfilling a public promise, does not always come himself. He sends men with tablets and purses of gold. These negotiations are business transactions, conducted in the lanista's office, away from the dust of the courtyard. Yet, the ripple effect is felt instantly. The doctor barks louder. The pace of the drills quickens. The rumor mill, usually a slow drip of speculation, turns into a torrent. When the specific gladiators are selected for the upcoming munus, the dynamic in the school stratifies. Those chosen are separated. They are the ordinary, the featured fighters. Suddenly, they are the center of attention. Their diet improves even further. Better cuts of meat are added to the stew to build strength in these final days. The masseurs work on them for longer periods, ensuring every muscle fiber is loose and reactive. It is a strange sensation to be fattened and polished like a prize bull before the slaughter. For the chosen men, the training shifts from conditioning to choreography. While the fights are real and the danger of death is present, the editor pays for a show. A quick, clumsy death serves no one. The lanista and the doctor work with the pairs, analyzing their styles. They look for matchups that will create sparks. A defensive wall against an agile hornet. Strength against speed. They want a narrative arc in the combat. The fighters are instructed on how to prolong the engagement, how to make the near misses look closer, how to bleed in a way that thrills the crowd without ending the fight too soon. The tension in the ludus during this week is palpable. The unselected men watch with a mix of relief and jealousy. To fight is to risk death, but to fight is also the only path to glory, money, and eventually, freedom. To be left behind is to remain a slave in the shadows. For the chosen, the psychological weight increases. They begin to withdraw into themselves. The banter in the mess hall dies down. A man looks at his opponent across the table, a man he has shared bread with for months, and knows that in 3 days he might have to drive a sword into his throat. They stop making eye contact. The brotherhood fractures under the pressure of the coming spectacle. The day before the games, the routine is completely upended for the Scena Libera. This is the free banquet, a public feast held in the evening. It is one of the most surreal traditions of the gladiatorial world. The gates of the ludus, or a rented public hall, are thrown open. The public is invited to come and watch the gladiators eat. Tables are laden with food far superior to the daily barley mash. Roast pork, game birds, fine breads, honey cakes, and wine that doesn't taste like vinegar. The gladiators are seated at these tables, the guests of honor at their own funeral wake, and the public pours in. They are not there to dine with the men, they are there to inspect them. Gamblers move through the crowd, scrutinizing the fighters. They look at the definition of a bicep, the clarity of the eyes, the way a man holds his cup. Is he shaking? Is he eating heartily, showing confidence? Or has he lost his appetite, paralyzed by fear? Bets are placed in hushed tones. 10 denarii on the Thracian. He looks hungry. Against the netman. He looks pale. The gladiators are zoo animals, specimens to be poked and prodded by the eyes of the mob. The reactions of the fighters to this intrusion vary. The veterans, the showmen, play to the crowd. They eat voraciously, laughing loudly, toasting their own impending victories. They flirt with the women who come to stare at the dangerous virile men. They project an aura of invincibility. It is a mask, of course, but a necessary one. To show fear is to invite the crowd's disdain, and the crowd's disdain can be a death sentence if the fight goes to a verdict. Other gladiators, often the newcomers or the more introspective souls, ignore the crowd entirely. They eat in silence, or they do not eat at all. They might dictate their wills to a scribe sitting nearby. This is a common sight at the Scena Libera. A slave calmly allocating his meager possessions. A few coins to a friend, a lucky charm to a lover. A request for a specific burial rite. The contrast is jarring. The festive atmosphere of the banquet, the smell of roast meat, the laughter of the crowd, clashing with the quiet, scratching sound of a will being written. Some men, overwhelmed by the fatalism of the moment, indulge too much. They drink the wine as if it were water, seeking oblivion. The Lanista's guards usually intervene before they become too intoxicated. A drunk gladiator puts on a bad show, but a certain amount of hedonism is tolerated. If a man is to die tomorrow, why deny him this last pleasure? As the night wears on, the public is ushered out. The tables are cleared. The illusion of being celebrated heroes fades, and the reality of being prisoners returns. The men are marched back to their cells. The mood in the barracks on the night before the games is heavy, almost suffocating. The silence is different from other nights. It is charged. In the darkness of the cells, the mental preparation begins. Some men pray, their whispers drifting through the lattice doors. Others check their equipment one last time, running their fingers over the leather straps, reassured by the tactile familiarity. They visualize the arena. Not the training ground, but the great amphitheater. They try to imagine the noise, the heat, the blinding white sand. Sleep is elusive. The adrenaline is already leaking into their systems. The heart beats a little faster. Every creak of the building sounds like the approach of dawn. When sleep does come, It is light and fitful. The morning of the games arrives not with the sun, but with the bustle of activity long before dawn. The ludus is a hive of movement. There is no training today. Today is about transport and presentation. The gladiators are fed a light meal, enough for energy, but not so much as to cause sickness. They are washed and groomed. Their hair is oiled. They must look the part of the gods of the arena. The weapons and armor are packed into carts. These are not the dull wooden practice swords. These are the arma, the true weapons. The edges are razor sharp, honed to a deadly finish. The armor is polished until it acts like a mirror. Plumes of horsehair, dyed red or purple, are attached to the helmets. The visual impact is crucial. The procession, the pampa, is the first event of the day. The gladiators are led out of the ludus, often in shackles or surrounded by a heavy guard, to the location of the games. If it is a major festival in Rome, the procession winds through the streets, leading to the Colosseum. They walk behind the lictors, the musicians playing trumpets and horns, and the platform carrying the images of the gods. The editor rides in a chariot, soaking up the applause. For the gladiator walking in this parade, the sensory input is overwhelming. The noise of the city is deafening compared to the quiet of the school. Thousands of people line the streets. They shout the names of their favorites. They jeer at the ones they want to see fall. The gladiator sees the faces of the mob, the baker, the senator, the child, the soldier. All of them united by the desire to watch him bleed. He must walk with his head high. He must look like a warrior. He keeps his eyes fixed on the back of the man in front of him, locking his focus. They arrive at the amphitheater. The scale of the building is terrifying. The Colosseum, the Flavian amphitheater, looms like a mountain of stone. They are led into the bowels of the arena, the hypogeum. This is the backstage area, a labyrinth of corridors, cages, and mechanical lifts. The air here is cool and damp, smelling of wild animals, unwashed bodies, and fear. They are placed in holding cells. Above them, they can hear the thrum of the crowd, a vibration that travels down through the stone structure. It sounds like a distant storm, a constant low-frequency roar. Thump, thump, thump. The stamping of feet, the chanting. The games have already begun with the morning beast hunts, the venaciones. They can hear the roar of lions, the screams of the hunters, the cheer of the crowd as an animal is dispatched. The gladiators wait. This waiting is the hardest part. It can last for hours. They sit in the semi-darkness, listening to the muffled violence above. They stretch to keep warm. They pace the small cells. The lanista is there, giving final instructions, perhaps offering a few words of encouragement, but mostly checking the equipment. He is a manager checking his stock. The midday executions take place. The criminals are put to death in the arena during the lunch break. The gladiators know this signals that their time is near. The mood shifts from anxiety to a cold, hard resolve. The medicus does a final round, offering water, checking eyes. Then, the call comes. The trumpets blast, a sound that cuts through the noise of the crowd. The tubai and cornua announce the main event, the afternoon session, the gladiatorial combat. The door to the holding cell opens. The light from the corridor spills in. Move, the guard says. They stand up. They pick up their helmets. They check the grip on their swords. They walk down the corridor towards the ramp that leads up to the arena floor. The noise grows louder with every step, transforming from a hum into a physical wall of sound. At the end of the ramp, there is a gate. Beyond it, the blinding light of the afternoon sun hitting the white sand. The dust motes dance in the shafts of light. The gladiator takes a breath. The air tastes of copper and dust. He steps forward. The gate opens. Stepping out onto the arena sand is a shock to the senses. The light is incredibly bright after the gloom of the hypogeum. The heat hits you like a physical blow. But the most overwhelming thing is the eyes. 50,000 pairs of eyes, rising in tiers towards the sky, a wall of humanity looking down. The noise is no longer a roar. It is a chaotic mix of screams, whistles, and shouts. The gladiators are lined up for the prelude. The editor examines the weapons to ensure they are sharp, a ritual called the probatio armorum. There is no cheating here. The crowd demands real steel. The pairs are announced. The herald shouts the name of the gladiator, his school, and his number of victories. From the ludus magnus, Salatus the Thracian, 3 fights, 3 victories. The crowd roars its approval or disapproval. Then the arena clears. Only the referee, the summa rudis, and the first pair of fighters remain. The referee wears a white tunic with a purple border. He holds a long staff to separate the fighters if rules are breached. He signals the start. The world shrinks. The 50,000 people vanish. The noise fades into background static. All that exists is the man standing 10 feet away. The sand underfoot is deep and loose, making movement difficult. The gladiator settles into his stance. He watches the tip of his opponent's sword. He waits for the first twitch of a muscle. The months of drilling, the endless repetition against the wooden post, the porridge, the discipline, it all comes down to this moment. The fight begins not with a rush, but with a probe, a test of distance. The clash of steel rings out, sharp and clear. The crowd gasps. The dance has started, and in that dance, time distorts. Seconds feel like minutes. The gladiator is hyper-aware. He sees the sweat on his opponent's brow. He hears the rasp of breath in the helmet. He feels the vibration of the impact in his shoulder. He is not thinking. He is reacting. His body knows what to do. But not every fight ends quickly. Fatigue sets in rapidly under the sun and the weight of the armor. The breath comes in ragged gasps. The shield feels like it weighs a ton. The legs burn. And then the mistake happens. A slip. A parry that is a fraction of a second too slow. The sensation of being cut is often not felt immediately. It is a cold shock, followed by a warm wetness spreading under the tunic. Then the pain arrives, sharp and insistent. If the wound is not fatal, the fight continues. But if a gladiator is overpowered, if he is knocked to the ground or disarmed, the dynamic changes instantly. The fight stops. The defeated gladiator, if he is still conscious, drops his shield. He kneels. He raises his left hand, the index finger extended. He looks not at his opponent, but at the referee, and then at the editor's box. He does not beg. He maintains the discipline of the ludus. He waits for the verdict. The editor looks to the crowd. This is the moment of ultimate power. The people scream, "Mitte," or "Jugula." They wave their cloths or turn their thumbs. The gesture is not the simple thumbs up or down of Hollywood. It is the pollis verso, the turned thumb. A thumb pressed down on a closed fist might mean swords down, mercy. A thumb thrust upward or toward the throat means give him the steel. The gladiator on his knees watches the editor. He sees the hand move. He knows his fate. If it is mercy, he is allowed to leave the arena, to live to fight another day. The relief is a physical collapse. If it is death, he must not flinch. His opponent approaches. The kneeling man offers his neck. He accepts the blade. It is the final act of his performance, the ultimate display of Roman virtue, contempt for death. But let us step back from the edge of the grave. Let us assume our gladiator has won. The opponent has surrendered and been granted missio, mercy. Or perhaps the opponent lies dead. The victor stands in the center of the arena. The noise washes over him, but now it is adulation. He is given a palm branch, the symbol of victory. He might receive a purse of gold coins. He circles the arena, acknowledging the cheers. For this moment, he is not a slave, he is a king. He walks back down the ramp, back into the shadows of the hypogeum. The adrenaline crash is profound. His hands shake. The cuts and bruises begin to throb. He is led back to the recovery area. The medicus is there to stitch him up. The other gladiators, those who have yet to fight, look at him. He has survived. He has returned from the other side. The return to the ludus that evening is a strange affair. The cart ride back is quieter. There are empty spaces on the benches. Friends are missing. The joy of victory is tempered by the reality of loss, but there is also a grim satisfaction. They are still here. They are the survivors. They eat the evening meal. The food tastes better tonight. The wine flows a little more freely. They retell the moments of the fight. I saw him drop his shoulder, so I went high. The sand was slippery near the podium. They analyzed the survival. And then, the sleep. The deep, comatose sleep of the physically and emotionally drained. They have purchased another few months of life with their sweat and blood. The cycle has completed one revolution. But the life of a gladiator is not just about the fighting. It is about the spaces in between. It is about the hierarchy, the specialized roles, and the strange, quiet dignity found in the most violent of professions. We must now look deeper into the specific types of gladiators, the armaturae, to understand the diversity of this existence. For not all gladiators were created equal, and the equipment they wore dictated their entire experience of the world. To understand the daily reality of a gladiator, one must understand the specific burden he carried. A gladiator was not a generic warrior. He was a specialist, defined by his armatura, his equipment class. This classification dictated everything: his training regimen, his diet, his opponents, and the specific aches and pains that plagued him at night. The equipment was not just a tool, it was an extension of his body, a heavy metal second skin that shaped his existence. Consider the murmillo. He is the heavy infantryman of the arena, the stoic wall against which other fighters break. His day-to-day life is defined by the scutum, the large rectangular shield. It is made of plywood, layers of wood glued together, covered in leather and edged in bronze. It is heavy, weighing perhaps 10 kilograms. In training, the murmillo spends hours simply holding this shield in the correct position. His left shoulder is often overdeveloped, a knot of dense muscle constantly engaged to keep the shield raised. The doctor drills into him the importance of the shield edge. It is not just a barrier, it is a weapon. A punch with the bronze rim can stun an opponent or break a nose. The murmillo's helmet, the cassi, is a masterpiece of protection and a prison of isolation. Made of thick bronze, it features a broad brim to deflect downward strokes and a high crest. But the defining feature is the face mask. It is a solid sheet of metal, pierced only by small eye grills. Once the helmet is strapped on, the murmillo is cut off from the world. The peripheral vision is non-existent. He can only see what is directly in front of him. The ventilation is poor. In the summer heat of Rome, the temperature inside the helmet soars. The air becomes stale and hot, recycled breath mixing with the metallic tang of the bronze. A murmillo learns to breathe shallowly, to conserve oxygen, to remain calm when the urge to rip the helmet off becomes overwhelming. His opponent is often the Thrax, the Thracian. The Thrax lives a different physical reality. His shield, the parmula, is small and square. It does not offer the full body protection of the scutum. Therefore, the Thrax cannot stand still. He must be in constant motion. His calves are wrapped in high greaves, ochria, reaching up to the mid-thigh because his legs are exposed targets. These greaves are heavy, changing the biomechanics of his running. He must lift his legs higher with each step. The Thrax's weapon, the Sika, is a curved short sword. This curve is not for aesthetics. It is a geometrical solution to the problem of the Murmillo's big shield. The Thrax learns to visualize the arc of the blade reaching around the straight edge of the shield to peck at the unarmored back or kidney area. He is a technician of angles. In the barracks, you can often spot a Thrax by the way he stretches his legs, constantly massaging the muscles that bear the weight of the heavy greaves. Then there is the retiarius, the net fighter. He is the anomaly, the outcast even among outcasts. He wears no helmet. He wears no greaves. He is the only gladiator whose face is visible to the crowd. This psychological vulnerability is profound. When the crowd screams for his death, he can see their faces. He cannot hide behind a mask. His expression of fear or pain is on display. His equipment consists of the rete, the fucina, and a dagger. His only armor is the manica on his left arm, and the gallerus, a metal shoulder guard. The gallerus is a high vertical plate meant to protect the neck and lower face from lateral strikes. The retiarius must learn to turn his left shoulder towards the opponent, ducking his head behind this metal fin for protection. The net is a complex tool. It must be carefully folded and held in the hand, ready to be cast. If it is tangled, the retiarius is dead. He spends hours in the ludus practicing the fold, loop over loop, arranging the weights. It is a quiet, meticulous task, like a fisherman preparing his lines. The net must be kept slightly damp to remain pliable. A dry net is stiff and brittle. So the retiarius is often found by the water trough, tending to his mesh. Fighting as a retiarius requires a different kind of fitness. He must be a sprinter. He cannot block a heavy sword with his net or trident. The wood would shatter. He must run. He must evade. The crowd often mocks the retiarius for running, calling him a coward, but his life depends on distance. He is a hunter, waiting for the heavy pursuer to tire, to stumble, to gasp for air inside the heavy helmet. Only then does he strike with the trident. The natural enemy of the retiarius is the secutor, the chaser. The secutor is a specialized variation of the murmillo, designed specifically to defeat the net man. His equipment reflects this purpose. His helmet is smooth, round, and egg-shaped. It has no brim, no crest, no decorations. Why? Because a net can snag on a crest. The secutor's helmet is designed to let the net slide off harmlessly. But this design comes at a terrible cost. The face mask of the secutor has two very small round eye holes, barely an inch wide. The visibility is the worst of all gladiator classes. And because the helmet sits so close to the face to prevent snagging, the air volume inside is minimal. The secutor is fighting against asphyxiation as much as he is fighting the retiarius. He knows he has limited time. He cannot fight a long match. He will pass out from heat exhaustion and lack of oxygen. So, the secutor is trained to be aggressive, to close the distance immediately, to force the fight before his own body fails him. The dynamic between the secutor and the retiarius is a race against time. One man running to exhaust the other sprinting to kill before he suffocates. There are other, rarer types that add color to the ludus. The hoplomachus, resembling the old Greek hoplites, armed with a spear and a small round shield. He fights with a distant, poking style, different from the close-quarters butchery of the swordsman. The Dimacharius, the dual wielder, who fights with 2 swords and no shield. This requires immense coordination and ambidexterity. These men are often the virtuosos of the school, highly skilled but incredibly vulnerable to missile weapons or a solid shield charge. And occasionally, there is the Essidarius, the chariot fighter. These men train with horses. The smell of the stables is part of their daily life. They must learn to balance on a moving platform, to drive and fight simultaneously. Their training ground is the larger track, the circus, rather than the small courtyard of the ludus. They are a breed apart, often bonding more with their horses than with their fellow gladiators. The maintenance of this equipment is a never-ending cycle of labor. The leather straps that hold the armor in place, the cingulum, are constantly soaked with sweat. Salt ruins leather, making it hard and prone to cracking. Every evening, the gladiators must clean their straps, rubbing them with tallow or oil to keep them supple. A snapped strap in the arena is a disaster. A greave falling off or a helmet shifting can be fatal. So, they obsess over their gear. They inspect the rivets on their helmets. They check the lamination of their shields. This maintenance is a quiet, meditative part of their existence. It is a way of exerting control over their fate. The armor itself is heavy. A full kit for a murmillo or secutor can weigh 15 to 18 kilograms. Wearing this in the Roman sun, performing high-intensity combat, places an enormous strain on the body. Heat management is a critical skill. The gladiators learn to move efficiently to keep their core temperature down. They learn to recognize the signs of heat stroke in themselves and their opponents. The cessation of sweating, the dizziness, the confusion. The manica, the arm guard worn by almost all types, is a complex piece of engineering. It can be made of segmented metal plates, overlapping like the scales of a lizard, or of quilted linen stuffed with horsehair or wool. The metal version offers better protection, but is heavier and can cut into the skin at the joints. The linen version is lighter, but offers less protection against a thrust. Putting on the manica is a 2-man job. It must be laced tight to prevent it from sliding, but not so tight as to cut off circulation. The ritual of armoring up is a bonding moment in the ludus, men helping each other with buckles and laces, checking the fit, offering a pat on the back. The baltus, the wide leather belt, is another essential piece. It is often decorated with metal studs or plates. It serves a protective function, guarding the lower abdomen and kidneys, but it is also a symbol of status. A veteran gladiator might have a balteus with intricate silver inlays, a gift from a wealthy patron or purchased with his own prize money. It supports the weight of the loincloth, the sublegaculum, and holds the scabbard for the sword. We must also consider the sounds of the equipment. In the ludus, the soundscape is defined by the materials. The rattle of the retiarius's chain, the heavy thud of the murmillo's shield hitting the ground, the squeak of leather straps, the scrape of a crest against a low doorway. These sounds become the background noise of the gladiator's life. He knows who is walking behind him just by the sound of their gear. But beyond the metal and the leather, there is the human element of these classes. A man is assigned an armatura based on his physical build, but over time, it shapes his personality. The murmillos, relying on defense and patience, often become the steady, reliable leaders of the barracks. The retiari, constantly moving, constantly watching, often develop a nervous energy, a hyper-awareness. The Thraces, the aggressors, tend to be the boldest, sometimes the most reckless. the role they play in the sand begins to bleed into who they are in the mess hall. The relationship between different classes in the ludus is complex. They are teammates, but they are also natural rivals. A murmillo knows that the thryax, sleeping 3 bunks down, is training every day specifically to kill him. They eat together, they joke together, but there is always that underlying knowledge. I know how you move, they think. I know you drop your left hand when you are tired. This intimacy with each other's weaknesses creates a strange tension. It is not hatred, it is professional assessment. When a gladiator retires, if he ever does, the toll of his specific class remains written on his body. The murmillo will have a bad shoulder and perhaps deafened ears from the blows to his helmet. The thrax will have bad knees from the crouching and the weight of the greaves. The retiarius might be scarred on his face and legs, the areas his armor did not cover. They carry their history in their bones. But let us move away from the equipment and look at the structure that governed these men. The ludus was not just a gym, it was a business, a prison, and a school wrapped into one, and at the center of it all was the lanista. To understand the gladiator, one must understand the man who owned him. The lanista was a figure of contradiction, despised by society as a flesh peddler, yet courted by the powerful for the entertainment he provided. The office of the lanista is usually located near the entrance of the ludus, separate from the noise and smell of the barracks. It is a room of business, not of war. Here, the air smells of papyrus, wax, and money. To the Roman elite, the lanista is a necessary evil. He is often a former gladiator himself, or a butcher, or a low-born entrepreneur who has clawed his way up. Socially, he is untouchable, stained by the trade of death. He cannot hold public office. He sits in the back rows of the theater. Yet when the senators and magistrates need a show to appease the mob, they come to his door, hat in hand. Inside this office, the ledger is the most important weapon. The running of a gladiatorial school is an incredibly expensive endeavor. The lanista must balance the books with the precision of a banker. He stares at columns of numbers, the cost of barley, the salary of the medicus, the bribes for the local guards, the price of new iron for the armory, and then the assets, the men. Each gladiator represents a significant capital investment. A healthy, trained fighter is worth thousands of sestertii. To lose one to disease or a training accident is a financial blow. The lanista walks the fine line between pushing his men hard enough to win, and thus increase their value, and preserving them to fight another day. He is a farmer of men, and the harvest is the munus. He relies heavily on his staff. The doctor is his right hand. As we have seen, the doctor is the disciplinarian, the drill sergeant. But his role goes deeper. He is the bridge between the owner and the property. He knows the temperaments of the men. He knows who is on the verge of breaking, who is hoarding food, who is planning an escape. The doctor is usually a primus palus, who received his freedom, but chose to stay in the only world he understands. He carries the scars of the arena, which gives him an unquestionable authority. When he speaks, even the wildest recruit listens, for they are listening to a survivor. Then there are the magistri, the specialized trainers often hired on contract. A famous retired retiarius might be brought in for a month to teach advanced net techniques. These men are the guest professors of the ludus. They bring new styles, new tricks from other provinces. A gladiator school in Capua might fight differently than one in Pompeii or Rome, and these traveling experts help cross-pollinate the fighting styles, keeping the games evolving and fresh. But where do these men, the raw material of the school, come from? The supply chain of the ludus is a grim reflection of the Roman world. The bulk of the recruits are servi, slaves. Many are prisoners of war, purchased wholesale after a successful campaign on the frontiers. A tall, blond warrior from Germania, captured in the dark forests, finds himself sold in a market in Rome. He does not speak Latin. He does not understand the customs. He is angry, confused, and violent. The lanista buys him for his size and his ferocity. This transition is traumatic. The warrior is stripped of his tribal identity, his name, and his gods. He is shaved, washed, and branded. The tattoo, the stigma, is inked onto his face or arm, marking him forever as property of the ludus. Others are criminals, noxii, sentenced to the schools ad ludum. This was considered a lighter sentence than ad bestias, to the beasts, or ad metallum, to the mines. In the ludus, there was at least a chance of survival. If a criminal fought well for 3 years, he could be manumitted, freed. For a thief or a murderer, the arena offered a narrow, blood-slicked path to redemption. These men were often desperate, fighting with the reckless abandon of those with nothing to lose. But the most fascinating group, and perhaps the hardest to understand for the modern mind, are the octorati, the volunteers. These were free Roman citizens who voluntarily signed their lives away. Why would a free man choose to become a slave? The reasons were usually economic. A man buried in debt, hounded by creditors, with no way to feed his family, might see the signing bonus, the price of his head, as the only way out. The lanista would pay off his debts in exchange for his service. The citizen would kneel and take the oath, the sacramentum gladiatorium, effectively committing social suicide. In that moment, he became infamous. He lost his right to vote, his right to leave a will, his status in society. But he gained a roof, food, and a chance at glory. For some, however, it was not about money. It was about the allure of the sand. In a society that worshipped martial valor, the gladiator was a paradoxical celebrity. He was the lowest of the low, yet he was adored. Women wrote their names on the walls of the ludus. Graffiti in Pompeii preserves this adoration. Celadus the Thracian, the hero of the girls. Crescens the net fighter, the doctor to the knightly girls. For a young man with no prospects, bored by the drudgery of a shop or a farm, the arena offered a taste of fame, a rush of adrenaline that ordinary life could not provide. There were even aristocrats, men of high birth, who scandalized Rome by entering the arena. Emperors like Commodus fought, though often with rigged advantages, but lesser nobles also dabbled in the blood sport. To the traditionalists, this was a horror, a degradation of Roman dignity. To the mob, it was thrilling. Regardless of their origin, once they entered the ludus, the distinctions of the outside world vanished. The German warrior, the Roman debtor, the Jewish rebel, the Thracian thief, they all wore the same coarse tunic, ate the same bean stew, and feared the same doctore. The ludus was a melting pot where the only currency was skill with a blade. The economics of the games themselves were complex. The lanista did not usually sell the gladiators to the editor for the games. He rented them. A contract was drawn up. The editor would pay a rental fee for each gladiator. If the gladiator returned alive, the fee was kept. If the gladiator was killed or maimed so badly he could never fight again, the editor had to pay the full replacement value of the man. This could be an astronomical sum, sometimes 50 times the rental fee. This created a strange financial incentive for mercy. The editor, often a magistrate trying to win votes, wanted to look generous to the crowd by granting death. but he also had to watch his budget. Killing a top-tier gladiator was like crashing a Ferrari. It was a spectacular waste of money. Therefore, death in the arena was not as common as Hollywood would have us believe. Some estimates suggest that in standard professional bouts, only 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 fights ended in a fatality. The gladiators were too valuable to throw away carelessly. This financial reality meant that the lanista often acted as a protector of his men. He would argue with the editor before the games, demanding guarantees, limiting the number of fights his men would participate in. He would bribe the referees to step in quickly if a fight got too messy. He was investing in their longevity. The relationships between the ludus and the outside world were porous. Fans, known as amatores, would hang around the gates of the school. They would try to catch a glimpse of their heroes. They would bribe the guards to pass messages or gifts, food, wine, amulets. Some wealthy matrons paid handsomely for private meetings with famous gladiators. The sexual mystique of the gladiator was powerful. They were seen as raw, untamed virility, untainted by the softness of civilized life. There was also a dark trade in gladiator byproducts. The blood of a dead gladiator was believed to cure epilepsy. It was sold while still warm. The sweat scraped from their skin with the strigil was mixed into face creams and sold to high-born women as an aphrodisiac or a beauty treatment. Even in death or in the maintenance of their bodies, they were commodities to be consumed by Rome. Inside the ludus, the gladiators were aware of their status. They knew they were toys. This knowledge bred a specific kind of dark humor. They joked about their price tags. "Don't scratch me," a fighter might say in sparring. "I'm worth more than your whole village." They took a grim pride in their value. To be a high-priced gladiator was to be someone who mattered, even if that worth was measured in coins rather than rights. The lanista also managed the gregari, the herdmen. These were the lowest tier, often criminals or untalented slaves who were not given specialized training. They were used for the group fights, the mass battles that often opened the games. They were cannon fodder. They did not get the massages or the prime cuts of meat. The elite gladiators looked down on them. The hierarchy within the school was steep. The starfighters had their own cells, sometimes even servants, other slaves, to attend to them. The gregarii slept in crowded dormitories, on the floor. It is evening again in our narrative. The lanista is closing his ledger. The numbers balance for now. He hears the low murmur of the men in the mess hall. He knows that tomorrow he must negotiate a contract for a show in a neighboring town. He needs to decide which of the novices is ready for their first fight. It is a business decision. He mentally reviews the roster. The young Gaul is fast but skittish. The new volunteer is strong but lacks discipline. He decides to pair them up in tomorrow's training. He blows out the lamp in his office. The smell of the wick smoke mixes with the eternal dust. He walks out into the courtyard. The moon is up. He sees the sentries on the walls. He checks the locks on the main gate himself. It is a habit. He is a jailer, after all. He walks past the cells. He hears a man crying out in his sleep. A nightmare. The lanista pauses, listens, and then moves on. He does not intervene. Nightmares are part of the overhead costs. As we move deeper into the night and deeper into the reality of this life, we must consider the medical reality these men faced. The violence was not without consequence. The medicus was as important as the doctor. The treatment of wounds, the setting of bones, and the primitive but effective surgery of the time allowed these men to survive injuries that would have killed a legionary in the field. The valetudinarium. the infirmary of the ludus, is a place of quiet focus, distinct from the aggression of the courtyard and the camaraderie of the mess hall. It is the domain of the medicus, a figure who commands a different kind of respect than the lanista. If the lanista owns the gladiators' lives, the medicus is the one who sustains them. The air here is perpetually cool, thick with the sharp, astringent scents of vinegar, wine, unwashed wool, and the earthy aroma of dried herbs, sage, rue, and roasted rosin. The room is lined with shelves holding ceramic jars, each labeled in careful script. Inside are the tools of repair, honey for sealing wounds to prevent infection, cobwebs to staunch bleeding, powdered minerals, and various salves made from animal fats. On a low table, the surgical instruments are laid out on a clean cloth. These are not crude tools. Roman medicine, particularly in the context of the gladiatorial schools, represents the pinnacle of ancient surgical knowledge. There are scalpelli of different sizes, with bronze handles and iron blades, detachable and sharp. There are vulsella, tweezers with serrated edges for gripping bone fragments or pulling out splinters. There are probes, spatulas, and bone levers. They gleam in the lamplight, cold and precise. When a gladiator is brought in after a training accident or a fight, the atmosphere is calm. Panic is not permitted here. The medicus works with the efficiency of a craftsman repairing a broken mechanism. He washes his hands in vinegar. Hygiene is understood, albeit through the lens of balancing humors and preventing corruption of the flesh rather than germ theory. Let us observe the treatment of a common injury, a deep laceration on the thigh, sustained perhaps from a mistimed parry against a Thracian Sika. The gladiator lies on the wooden operating table. He bites down on a leather strap. There is no anesthesia as we know it. He might have been given a draught of wine mixed with henbane or poppy juice, enough to dull the sharpest edge of the pain and induce a drowsy detachment, but not enough to render him unconscious. He must be awake to follow commands, to move a limb if needed. The medicus first cleans the wound. He uses a sponge soaked in acidum, strong vinegar, to wash away the blood and dirt. The sting is intense, causing the muscle to twitch involuntarily, but the gladiator does not cry out. To show pain is to show weakness. The medicus inspects the depth of the cut. He checks for severed nerves or arteries. If an artery is nicked, he uses a hook to pull it forward and ties it off with a thread of linen or silk, a technique of ligation that saves countless lives. If the wound is clean, it must be closed. For deep wounds, the medicus uses fibulae, metal clips that pinch the skin together, or he stitches it with a needle and thread. The stitching is an art. The skin must be pulled tight enough to heal, but not so tight that it tears. He works rhythmically. The needle punctures the tough skin. The thread is pulled through. A knot is tied. Over and over. The silence of the room is broken only by the heavy breathing of the patient and the soft sound of the needle. Once closed, the wound is dressed. A poultice is applied, perhaps a mixture of honey and moldy bread, a primitive antibiotic, or a paste of crushed herbs. It is covered with a clean linen bandage, wrapped tightly. The gladiator is then moved to a recovery cot. Broken bones are a more complex challenge. In the arena, the impact of a shield rim or a heavy mace can shatter a forearm or a shin. The medicus must set the bone. If the fracture is simple, he uses manual traction. Assistants hold the patient down while the medicus pulls the limb to align the bone fragments. The grinding sensation is nauseating, but the alignment must be perfect. If a gladiator heals with a crooked leg, his career and his life is over. Once aligned, The limb is encased in a cast. The Romans do not have plaster of Paris, but they have their own ingenuity. They use stiffened linen soaked in a mixture of egg whites and flour, or sometimes a clay mixture. This hardens into a rigid shell, immobilizing the limb. The gladiator is then suspended or propped up to keep the swelling down. It is in these infirmaries that some of the greatest medical discoveries of the ancient world are made. The most famous physician of antiquity, Galen of Pergamon, began his career as a doctor to the gladiators in his home city. He referred to the wounds of the gladiators as windows into the body. In a world where human dissection is largely forbidden by religious and social taboos, the gladiator school offers a unique opportunity to see the inner workings of human anatomy. Through the torn flesh of the fighters, the medicus sees the muscles contracting. He sees the pulsing of the arteries. He learns how the nerves control the fingers. He maps the human interior. When a gladiator dies, the medicus often performs an autopsy to understand why. This knowledge is then applied to the living. They learn that a severed tendon needs to be stitched, not just bandaged. They learn how to drain fluid from the chest. The gladiators are the unwilling subjects of a grand medical experiment, their suffering paving the way for the advancement of science. Recovery in the ludus is a test of patience. For a man used to the extreme physical exertion of training, lying still for weeks is a torment. The injured men lie in the semi-darkness of the valetudinarium. They listen to the muffled sounds of the drills outside. They hear the shouts of the doctore and the clash of swords, and they worry. They worry that their muscles are wasting away. They worry that a new recruit is taking their place in the lineup. They worry that the lanista will decide they are too expensive to feed while unproductive. The diet during recovery is strict. The barley mash is reduced to prevent them from getting fat while sedentary, but the protein is increased to aid healing. They are given rich broths, boiled eggs, and more of the bone ash tonic. This beverage, the podio, is rich in strontium and calcium. Modern analysis of gladiator bones confirms that they had remarkably high levels of these minerals, suggesting this dietary supplement was highly effective in building dense, resilient bones that healed quickly. The medicus visits daily. He smells the wounds. A foul smell indicates putrefaction, gangrene. If that scent appears, the mood in the infirmary darkens. The only option then is amputation or the searing iron. The cautery irons are heated in a brazier until they glow red. They are applied to the rotting flesh to burn out the infection. The smoke, the smell of burning meat, and the shock to the system are horrific, but it is often the only way to save the man's life. But let us focus on the quiet days of healing. The gladiators in the infirmary form a subgroup. They share stories of their injuries. "I took a spear to the shoulder in Neapolis," one whispers. "The doctor there used hot oil. This one uses wine." They compare scars. The body of a veteran gladiator is a roadmap of violence. There are the puckered white lines of old slashes, the circular depressions of puncture wounds, the knotted callus of a healed fracture. Each mark has a date, a location, and an opponent attached to it. They are proud of these scars. They are receipts of survival. The medicus also treats the less dramatic ailments. The skin infections from the dirty sand, the eye infections from the dust, the digestive troubles from the heavy bean diet. He is a general practitioner as well as a surgeon. He checks their teeth, scraping away tartar, pulling rotten molars. He is responsible for the entire biological machine. There is a psychological component to his work as well. A gladiator who has been badly mauled may develop a fear of the arena. He may wake up screaming. He may tremble when he picks up a sword. The medicus observes this. There is no formal psychology, but there is an understanding of the spirit. He might prescribe calming herbs, valerian, or chamomile. He might recommend a sacrifice to Asclepius, the god of healing. Or he might simply tell the lanista that the man needs more time, buying him a respite from the pressure of the training ground. As the weeks pass, the gladiator begins his rehabilitation. It starts slowly. Standing up, walking the length of the room, lifting light weights, stones or small logs. The medicus watches the movement. Is there a limp? Is the range of motion limited? He massages the scar tissue with oil to break it down, to keep the skin flexible. The unctores, the masseurs, work on the atrophied muscles, kneading life back into them. The return to the training ground is a critical moment. The gladiator steps back into the sunlight. He feels the sand under his feet. He is weaker, lighter. The other men look at him. He has to prove he is still one of them. He starts with the palace, the wooden post. He strikes it tentatively at first. The shock travels up his arm. It hurts, but it is a familiar pain. He strikes harder. The rhythm returns. The muscle memory is still there. But he is changed. Every injury changes a fighter. He might be more cautious now. He might protect his left side more. He adapts his style to his new physical reality. The doctor sees this and adjusts the training. Don't lunge so deep, he might say. Let him come to you. The gladiator evolves. Outside the walls of the ludus, the public perception of the gladiator's body is one of fascination. Physicians write treatises on their fitness. Sculptors use them as models for statues of gods and heroes. They are the physical ideal of the age, thick, powerful, functional. But inside the infirmary, the reality is stripped of romance. It is a reality of fragile flesh, of constant maintenance, of the struggle to keep the machine running in a sport designed to break it. The lanista pays the medicus well. He pays for the expensive imported balsams and the clean linen. It is a calculation. A gladiator who dies in the arena brings glory and perhaps a fee. A gladiator who dies of an infected scratch in the barracks brings nothing but a loss on the ledger. So the infirmary is one of the most well-funded departments of the school. As night falls over the infirmary, the oil lamps are dimmed. The medicus retires to his own quarters, leaving an assistant on watch. The injured men sleep, or try to. The pain is worse at night, when there are no distractions. They stare at the ceiling. They think about the fragility of their existence. One slip, 1 inch of steel, and they end up here, or worse. But there is also a resilience in this room. The human body's capacity to heal is miraculous, and these men are the testaments to that miracle. They have been cut, broken, and pierced, yet they knit back together. They rise again. They are often called barley men for their food, but they could also be called men of scar tissue. This cycle of breaking and healing creates a strange relationship with their own bodies. They view their bodies as separate entities, tools that they inhabit. My arm is slow today, they might say, not I am slow. They dissociate from the pain to survive it. This mental discipline is as important as the physical one. And what of the gladiator who cannot heal? The man whose knee is shattered beyond repair or whose hand is severed? He faces a bleak future. If he was a volunteer, a citizen, he might return to the world, crippled and poor, but free. If he was a slave, his fate depends on the lanista's mercy. He might be sold to a household as a porter or a guard if he can still walk. He might be kept on at the ludus as a servant, sweeping the sand he once fought on. Or, if he is useless and the lanista is cruel, he might be sold to the mines, a sentence that is effectively a slow death warrant. But for the gladiator currently lying on the cot, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of moonlight, there is only the present, the throbbing of the wound, the taste of the bitter tonic, the hope that tomorrow the pain will be less. He focuses on his breath, in, out, the simple, boring, vital act of staying alive. We have looked at the training, the hierarchy, the food, and the medicine. But to fully understand the gladiator, we must look at the end of the road. What happens when the fighting stops? What is the retirement plan for a death dealer? And how does the memory of the arena haunt or honor those who survive it? The ultimate goal of every gladiator, the horizon towards which all their suffering is directed, is the ludus. This simple object is nothing more than a wooden sword, similar to the ones used in training, but its significance is monumental. It is the physical embodiment of freedom. It is the key that unlocks the gate of the ludus from the inside. The granting of the ludus is a rare event. It is not given for a single victory, nor for mere survival. It is earned through a career of excellence, a sustained display of skill and courage that eventually compels the editor and the crowd to say, "Enough. You have done your duty. You are released." It might come after 5 years, or 10, or 20 fights. For many, it never comes at all. But the hope of it is the fuel that keeps the engine of the ludus running. Imagine the moment. The gladiator has just won a difficult bout. He is standing on the sand, chest heaving, blood dripping from a shallow cut on his arm. The crowd is cheering. But this time, the chant is different. They are not calling for money or palm branches. They are chanting, "Ludus, ludus." The editor in his box listens. He gauges the mood. He consults with the lanista. The lanista nods. The gladiator has paid for himself 10 times over. It is time. The editor signals. An official walks out onto the sand carrying the wooden sword. The gladiator drops his steel weapon. He kneels. He accepts the wood. His fingers close around the rough grain. In that second, the legal chains that bind him are snapped. He is no longer a slave of the school. He is a rudiarius. The walk back down the ramp to the hypogeum is the longest and lightest walk of his life. He is still covered in sweat and dust. He is still bleeding, but he is a free man. The other gladiators look at him with a mixture of reverence and longing. He has crossed the river. He has survived the storm. But the transition from gladiator to civilian is not simple. It is a profound psychological shock. For years, the gladiator's life has been completely structured. He was told when to wake, what to eat, when to train, and when to sleep. He had no decisions to make, only orders to follow. Suddenly, the walls are gone. The world is wide, chaotic, and indifferent. Many rudiarii find that they cannot leave the life completely. The ludus is the only home they know. The smell of the sand and the oil is ingrained in their senses. So, they stay. They negotiate a new contract, not as fighters, but as trainers. The transition from primus palus to doctore is a natural one. As a doctor, the former gladiator retains his status. He carries the staff. He barks the orders. He is the keeper of the knowledge. He teaches the novices how to twist the wrist to disarm an opponent, how to use the shield to blind a man to a low strike. There is a deep satisfaction in this. He is passing on the trade. He is the father figure to a new generation of doomed men. He sleeps in the ludus, eats the same food, but he sleeps with the door unlocked. He can walk out into the city whenever he chooses, buy a cup of wine with his own money, and walk back in. That difference is everything. Others use their specific set of skills for the private sector. Rome is a dangerous city. The streets at night are unlit and unpoliced. Wealthy senators, nervous merchants, and powerful equestrians need protection. Who better to guard your back than a man who has killed 5 men in single combat? A retired gladiator is the ultimate status symbol for a bodyguard. He is big, he is scarred, and he has a reputation. Walking through the Subura with a former Murmillo at your side is a guarantee of safety. These bodyguards often become part of the collegia, the guilds or associations that sometimes function like organized gangs. In the turbulent political climate of the late Republic, gladiators were often hired as political enforcers. They were the muscle at the rallies, the intimidation factor in the forum. It was a dirty business, swapping the honest violence of the arena for the shadowy violence of the street, but it paid well. Then there is the path of the celebrity. Some gladiators, particularly those who were handsome and charismatic, had amassed small fortunes from the gifts of admirers. They had lovers among the wealthy matrons of Rome. Upon retirement, they might leverage these connections. They might open a fencing school for wealthy amateurs, a ludus for gentlemen who wanted to sweat and feel dangerous without the risk of death. They became fitness coaches to the elite. But despite the freedom and the potential for money, the stigma remains. A gladiator, even a retired one, is infamous. He is legally infamous. This is a permanent stain on his character in the eyes of Roman law. He cannot vote. He cannot hold public office. He cannot be a witness in a court of law. He is free, but he is not a full citizen. He exists in a social twilight. He might be rich, he might be famous, he might be feared, but he will never be respectable. He will always be the man who sold his blood for entertainment. For the gladiator who retires into obscurity, life slows down. He might buy a small farm in the countryside, far from the roar of the Colosseum. He trades the sword for the plow. The rhythm of the seasons replaces the rhythm of the training schedule, but the body remembers. The physical toll of a gladiator's career becomes more apparent in retirement. The adrenaline no longer masks the pain. The arthritis sets in early. The joints, pounded by years of heavy lifting and concussive impacts, begin to seize up. The knee that was twisted in a grappling match 10 years ago aches when it rains. The shoulder that took the brunt of a shield charge is stiff in the mornings. They become old men before their time. A gladiator in his 40s is a relic. He moves with a stiffness that speaks of a hard life. He visits the public baths daily, soaking in the hot water, trying to ease the deep ache in his bones. The scars on his body are conversation starters. In the baths, men might point and whisper. That's Hermes. He fought in the games of Titus. The old gladiator nods, perhaps accepting a cup of wine from an admirer. He tells the stories. He remembers the specific quality of the light on a certain afternoon, the sound of a specific opponent's breathing. The memories are vivid, polished by repetition. But there are also the ghosts, the men who didn't make it, the friend who died in the first bout, the rival who slipped on a blood-slicked patch of sand. The retired gladiator lives with the knowledge that he is a statistical anomaly. He survived when so many others did not. There is a survivor's guilt, a quiet heaviness that sits in the chest. Why me? Why was my arm faster? Why did the editor turn his thumb up for me and down for him? They often find comfort in the worship of Hercules. Hercules, the hero who suffered, who performed labors, who was strong but weary. Shrines to Hercules are often found near amphitheaters and in the homes of retired fighters. They leave small offerings, a piece of their old equipment, a coin, a wreath. It is a soldier's religion, practical and somber. When a retired gladiator finally dies, usually not in the arena but in a bed, His funeral is a significant event for the local community. His family, or his burial club, ensures he has a proper tombstone. These tombstones are our primary source of information about their lives. They are eager to record their achievements. The epitaphs are simple and proud. They list the name, the fighting style, the number of fights, and the number of victories. Here lies Flamma, Secutor. Lived 30 years, fought 34 times, won 21 times, drew 9 times, defeated 4 times. The numbers tell the story. They want the world to know the score. They want to be remembered not as victims, but as athletes who played a deadly game and played it well. Some epitaphs are more personal. They speak of wives and children. To my well-deserving husband, a wife might write. This reminds us that these men were not just killing machines. They were fathers, husbands, lovers. They had lives outside the ludus walls, however limited. They loved and were loved. There is a poignant inscription on a gladiator's tomb in Sicily that reads, "Do not put off until tomorrow what you can do today, for you do not know what the next day will bring." It is a philosophy born of the arena, a wisdom forged in the shadow of imminent death. For the gladiator who did not survive to retirement, the end was starker. If he died in the arena, his body was dragged out through the Porta Libitinensis, the gate of Libitina, the goddess of funerals. 2 attendants would do this, one dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, striking the body with a hammer to ensure death, and another dressed as Mercury, poking it with a hot iron. It was a final piece of theater, but even in death, the Familia Gladiatoria took care of its own. The burial clubs ensured that even the fallen had a grave. They would not be thrown into the puticuli, the open pits for the poor and the slaves, if it could be helped. They were buried along the Appian Way or outside the city gates, their stones standing as silent sentinels. To walk through a Roman cemetery and read these stones is to see the human cost of the games. You see the ages, 19, 22, 25. You see the brevity of their lives, but you also see a defiance. They carved their names in stone so that they would not be erased. They asserted their identity in a world that tried to reduce them to meat. So, the life of a gladiator was a cycle of training, waiting, fighting, and recovering, all leading towards one of 2 exits, the wooden sword or the stone grave. It was a life of extreme contrasts, slavery and fame, discipline and violence, brotherhood and solitude. But what of the arena itself? The building that housed this spectacle. To understand the gladiator, we must understand his stage. The Colosseum, or any provincial amphitheater, was not just a pile of rocks. It was a machine, a complex breathing organism designed to process death and distribute entertainment. For the gladiator, the building was a character in his life, a monster he had to enter and tame. Let us look at the anatomy of the arena from the gladiator's perspective. The smells, the mechanics, the hidden spaces that the crowd never saw. To the spectator sitting in the sun-drenched stands of the Colosseum, the arena floor is a stage. It is a flat, white oval where gods and monsters clash. But for the gladiator, the arena is merely the roof of a much darker, more complex world. This world is the hypogeum, the underground. It is the belly of the beast. Entering the hypogeum is like descending into a submarine or a mine. The air temperature drops immediately. The bright Mediterranean sun is blocked out by the massive oak planks of the arena floor above, covered in a thick layer of sand. Down here, the light comes from flickering torches and oil lamps set into niches in the brickwork. The shadows are long and dancing, distorting dimensions and hiding the true extent of the labyrinth. the smell is the first thing that hits a man. It is a dense, physical wall of odor. It smells of unwashed bodies, hundreds of slaves, stagehands, and fighters crammed into narrow corridors. It smells of the animals, the musk of lions, the wet fur of bears, the pungent dung of elephants and rhinos kept in the holding pens. It smells of old blood, rotting sawdust, and the metallic tang of fear. It is the smell of a slaughterhouse mixed with a zoo. The layout is a maze of narrow corridors, arranged in concentric rings and straight lines bisecting the oval. The walls are made of travertine and brick, scarred by the movement of heavy cages and equipment. To navigate this space requires a mental map that only the insiders possess. A wrong turn leads you to a dead end, or worse, directly in front of a cage containing a starving tiger. The noise in the hypogeum is unique. It is not the roar of the crowd, though that is always present as a low, thrumming vibration in the ceiling. It is the sound of industry, chains rattling, pulleys squeaking, the heavy thud of timber being moved, the shouting of the mediastini, the arena workers who swarm like ants. They are the invisible engine of the games. They are pulling ropes, turning capstans, pushing carts. They are sweating in the semi-darkness so that the people above can be entertained. For the gladiator waiting for his bout, the proximity to the animals is a source of constant tension. The beast cages are lining the corridors. As he walks past, he hears the low growl of a lioness from the Atlas Mountains. He sees the yellow eyes tracking him through the bars. These animals have been starved and goaded to make them fierce for the morning hunts. They are agitated. The gladiator knows that only a few inches of wood and iron separate him from a mauling. The roar of a lion in a confined stone tunnel is deafening. It shakes the bones. The technology of the arena is a marvel of Roman engineering, terrifying in its ingenuity. The floor above is not solid. It is a Swiss cheese of trapdoors and elevators. There are dozens of these elevators, known as pegmata. They are essentially wooden cages connected to a system of ropes and pulleys. Down in the hypogeum, teams of slaves push against massive capstans, walking in endless circles to wind the ropes. When a gladiator or a beast is placed in the elevator, the signal is given. The slaves push, the ropes tighten, the cage rises through the darkness. A trapdoor in the arena floor opens automatically, triggered by the rising mechanism. The fighter seems to appear from nowhere, rising out of the earth like a specter. For the crowd, it is magic. For the gladiator, it is a jerky, claustrophobic ride upward. He stands in the dark box, feeling the lurch of the ropes, watching the square of light above get closer and closer. He holds his breath. He grips his weapon. When the floor level is reached, the door opens, and he steps out into the blinding light. There are also the scenery lifts. The Romans loved a narrative. They didn't just want men fighting. They wanted them fighting in a context. So, the stagehands in the hypogeum build elaborate sets, artificial forests with real trees, fake mountains, structures representing Troy or Carthage. These sets are hoisted up through the trap doors, transforming the flat sand into a theatrical landscape in minutes. The gladiator might find himself fighting not in an open ring, but in a dense thicket of bushes, complicating the line of sight, offering ambush points. He has to adapt instantly to the terrain the engineers have provided. The waiting areas for the gladiators are small, cramped cells carved into the stone foundations. Here, they sit while the morning events conclude. The sound of the crowd above tells them what is happening. A collective gasp means a near miss. A roar of laughter means something humiliated a fighter, perhaps a slip or a comical flight from a beast. A rhythmic chanting means the crowd is demanding a verdict. They learn to read the mood of the mob through the floorboards. They are angry today, a veteran might say, listening to the tone of the shouting. They want blood. Or, they are bored. We need to be flashy. The Summa Rudis, the senior referee, is also down here before the fights. He inspects the weapons again. He checks the gladiators for hidden armor or illegal advantages. He gives instructions. Clean fighting today, he might warn. The editor wants a display of skill, not a brawl. He is the master of ceremonies, ensuring the chaos has rules. Water is precious in the heat of the hypogeum. Slaves run back and forth with buckets and sponges. The gladiators drink sparingly. They wet their lips. They wipe the sweat that is already forming before they even step into the sun. The air is stagnant, heavy with humidity. To wait here for hours drains the energy. It is a test of endurance before the first blow is struck. Then there is the Porta Libitinensis connection. The gate of the dead connects directly to the hypogeum. When a body is dragged off the sand, it comes down here. The gladiators in the holding cells see the bodies of their comrades being carried past. They see the mangled limbs, the blood-soaked tunics. They see the reality of their profession paraded in front of them. It is a grim reminder. That could be me in an hour, they think. They do not look away. To look away is fear. They watch with a cold, professional detachment. He dropped his guard, they mutter. He was too slow. Finally, the moment comes. The call to the ramp. The gladiator leaves the waiting cell. He walks down the central corridor. The noise above crescendos. He walks past the sweating slaves turning the winches. He walks past the pacing tigers. He reaches the ramp or the elevator. The transition from the hypogeum to the arena is the most dramatic shift in his world. He goes from cool, dark, smelly confinement to vast, hot, bright exposure. The floor of the arena is covered in harina, sand. Why sand? Because it absorbs. It absorbs blood, sweat, and urine. It provides traction. A stone floor would be slippery and dangerous. The sand is raked clean between bouts by a team of boys, but deep down, it is saturated with the history of the games. It has a specific texture. It is heavy, often imported from riverbeds. It shifts under the sandals, requiring the gladiator to constantly adjust his balance. Stepping onto that sand, the gladiator feels small. The Colosseum walls rise 48 meters high. The seats are packed with 50,000 to 80,000 people. The noise is a physical force. It hits the chest like a wave of water. The sheer scale of the humanity is terrifying. The people in the top rows, the Summa Cavia, are just dots, yet their screams merge into the collective voice of Rome. There is a barrier between the sand and the first row of seats, the podium. It is a high wall, often 4 meters tall, smooth and vertical, to prevent animals or desperate men from leaping into the crowd. On top of this wall, there are rollers that spin if grabbed, denying any purchase. Archers stand guard in niches, ready to shoot anything that tries to escape. The gladiator is truly trapped. He is in a bowl. The only way out is through the gate of the victors or the gate of the dead. The sun plays a huge role. The orientation of the arena means that at certain times of day, one side is in shadow and the other in blinding light. The lanista teaches his men to fight for position. Keep the sun at your back is the golden rule. A gladiator facing the sun is half blind, squinting against the glare, unable to see the tip of the enemy's blade. The shadow is an ally. The atmosphere on the sand is charged with static energy. The crowd is not a passive observer. They are a participant. They throw things, flowers for a favorite, rotten fruit or bread for a coward. They shout advice. He's open on the left. Use the shield. They feel they own the gladiators, and in a way they do. The gladiator must tune this out. He must create a bubble of silence in the center of the chaos. He must focus only on the breathing of his opponent and the shifting of the sand. Standing there, in the center of the empire's greatest monument, the gladiator is the focal point of the world. For those few minutes, he is more important than the emperor. He holds the attention of thousands. It is a drug. The fear is there, yes, but so is the power. To stand alone, armed only with a sword and one's own skill, against another man, while the world watches, it is the ultimate test of existence. And when the fight is over, when the adrenaline fades, the descent back into the hypogeum feels like a return to the grave. The silence of the tunnels returns. The darkness swallows the fighter again. He has survived the light. This was the machine. A vertical assembly line of death, with the dark, sweating gears of the hypogeum below driving the bright, bloody spectacle above. The gladiator lived between these two worlds, a creature of the dark tunnels and the blinding sand. We have walked the path of the gladiator from the first cold morning in the ludus, through the porridge and the pain, the discipline and the doctors, the fear and the fighting, all the way to the wooden sword or the stone grave. We have seen the world through the eye slits of a helmet. Now, as we prepare to close this journey, we must take one final look at the legacy of these men. Why do they still haunt us? Why, 2,000 years later, are we still talking about the men who lived to die? The gladiator occupies a unique and paradoxical space in the Roman psyche, a space where repulsion and adoration coexist. To understand their legacy, we must look at how the Romans themselves struggled to categorize these men. They were legally infamy non-persons, stripped of the rights that defined a citizen. A gladiator could not testify in court. He could not make a legal will without special dispensation. He was, in the eyes of the law, a body to be used and discarded. Yet, in the eyes of the culture, he was the embodiment of the supreme Roman virtue, virtus. Virtus is a complex word. It derives from vir, meaning man. It encompasses courage, discipline, stoicism, and the ability to face death without flinching. The Romans, who prided themselves on being a martial people, saw in the gladiator a distilled, pure form of this quality. While the average Roman citizen was becoming softer, enjoying the luxuries of empire and the peace of the Pax Romana, the gladiator remained hard. He lived the reality that the Romans liked to believe was their national character. He faced the sharp edge of the sword not for the good of the state, but for the abstract purity of the fight itself. This created a deep cultural anxiety. The philosophers, the writers, and the senators could not stop talking about them. Cicero, the great orator, used gladiators as metaphors for political struggle. Seneca, the Stoic, was fascinated by their calmness. He wrote about a gladiator who, while being transported to the games in a cart, stuck his head between the spokes of the wheel to break his own neck rather than face the humiliation of the arena. For Seneca, this was the ultimate act of freedom, the refusal to submit to a fate imposed by others. The gladiator became a teacher of philosophy, demonstrating that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we face it. But the legacy is not just philosophical, it is physical. We see it in the graffiti scratched into the walls of Pompeii and Rome. These are not the official inscriptions of the tombstones. These are the fan scribblings of the common people. They are raw and immediate. Salatus makes the girls sigh. My heart beats for the net man. They draw crude stick figures of their heroes. They tally the victories. This graffiti reminds us that the ludus was not an isolated island. It was part of the fabric of the neighborhood. The gladiators were the local celebrities. The sounds of their training, the smell of their cooking, the sight of them walking to the baths. These were the background textures of daily Roman life. We must also consider the sheer longevity of this institution. The gladiatorial games lasted for nearly 7 centuries. They evolved from small funeral rites, human sacrifices held at the grave of a wealthy noble to appease his spirit, into the state-sponsored industrial spectacles of the Colosseum. Think of the generations of men who passed through this machine. The equipment changed slightly. Helmets became more enclosed, shields evolved, but the core reality remained the same. 2 men, 1 patch of sand, 1 sharp conflict. It was a constant in a world that was constantly changing. Emperors rose and fell, borders expanded and contracted, religions were born and died, but the games went on. Why did they end? It was not a sudden moral awakening. The end of the gladiators was a slow, grinding halt caused by economics and a shifting cultural tide. As the Roman Empire began to fracture in the 3rd and 4th centuries, the cost of the games became unsustainable. The supply of exotic animals from Africa dried up as trade routes were disrupted. The cost of feeding and training hundreds of men became a burden the state could no longer bear. Christianity played a role, certainly. The Christian writers condemned the games, not necessarily because they cared about the lives of the gladiators, but because the violence degraded the spectators. It stirred up passions that should be suppressed. It was idolatry, a worship of blood and false gods. In 404 AD, the Emperor Honorius finally issued a decree banning the gladiatorial schools. But even then, the games lingered in the provinces, a dying ember of the old world, until they simply faded away, replaced by the less lethal chariot races. The ludus fell silent. The wooden posts rotted in the courtyards. The shackles rusted. The barracks were converted into shops or housing for the poor. The great amphitheaters, once the loud beating hearts of the cities, were abandoned. The Colosseum was stripped of its marble facade to build palaces for popes and nobles. It became a fortress, then a quarry, then a romantic ruin. The sand blew away, revealing the hypogeum beneath, the skeleton of the machine exposed to the sky. Today, if you walk into the remains of a Roman amphitheater, whether in Rome or Verona or Arles or El Jem in Tunisia, you can still feel the weight of the history. The stone retains the coldness. The acoustics are still perfect. You can stand in the center and whisper and be heard in the top row. But it is quiet now. The screaming mob is gone. The lions are gone. The smell of blood has been washed away by 2,000 years of rain. But try to imagine the silence of the gladiator after the noise. The silence we have been seeking in this journey. Think of the gladiator who has finally received his rudies. He is an old man now, living in a small cottage on a hillside in Campania. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across his vineyard. He sits on a wooden bench, his hands resting on his knees. His hands are gnarled, the knuckles swollen, the skin map-like with old white scars. He holds a cup of wine, not the vinegar water of the ludus, but good, dark wine. He closes his eyes. He does not hear the roar of the crowd. That sound has faded into a distant hum, like the sound of the ocean in a seashell. He hears the wind rustling the leaves of the olive trees. He hears the bleating of a goat in the distance. He hears the rhythmic chirping of the cicadas. He feels the warmth of the sun on his face, the same sun that once beat down on him in the arena, but now it is gentle. It is not an enemy. He feels the solidity of the earth beneath his feet. He is safe. The gate is open. The wall is down. There is no doctore with a staff. There is no netman waiting in the shadows. There is only the evening, stretching out calm and blue. He takes a breath. It is a deep, slow breath. The air smells of rosemary and dry earth. He has survived. He has carried the burden of the heavy shield, the weight of the bronze helmet, the terror of the dark tunnel, and he has laid them all down. He is just a man sitting in the quiet of the world. The skills he learned, the frontier skills of the mind, are what saved him. The ability to endure, the ability to find a center of calm in the middle of a storm, the ability to focus on the immediate moment, to block out the fear of the future and the regret of the past. These are the skills of the survivor. And now, he can use them for rest. He watches the first star appear in the pale sky. It is Venus, the evening star. He pours a few drops of wine onto the ground, a libation to the ghosts of his brothers, the ones who didn't make it to the vineyard. He honors them with his memory. And then he finishes the cup. The night settles in. The world slows down. The history becomes a story, and the story becomes a whisper. The heavy eyelids of the day are closing. The stone walls of the ludus are far away. The sand is cool. The fire in the hearth burns low, casting a soft orange glow. It is time to rest. The fight is over. The armor is hung up. The wooden sword is on the shelf. The sleep that comes now is not the fitful, anxious sleep of the barracks. It is the deep, dreamless sleep of the free. It is the sleep of the stone. It is the sleep of the earth. So let the image of the quiet vineyard linger. Let the sound of the wind in the olive trees fill the space. Let the safety of the moment wrap around you like a warm wool blanket. The history is done. The book is closed. Good night, tired travelers. Sleep well. If this journey through the duller side of history helped you unwind and maybe even drift off, please let me know. First, hit that like button if you enjoyed this historical lullaby. Second, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future installments of history too boring to keep you awake. Finally, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below about which historical topic you find so mundane. It deserves to be our next sleepy video. Your suggestions will shape our journey into the world's most delightfully dull past.